Disclaimer, this stream is for information purposes only. We're not giving investment or transaction advice. All views expressed in this live stream are the views of the participants, not of Euromoney. All comments are public and on the record, and all content is copyright Euromoney Institutional Investor, PLC 2020. That said, hello and a very warm welcome to this week's Euromoney live stream. Great to have so many of you with us. I think we're on for a record audience. In fact, I think we've just gone through the record audience already. So it's great to have so many of you with us. As the world economy gets back on its feet, or begins to anyway, we're here to help you understand the new finance and investment landscape. My name is Richard Banks. I'm editor of Euromoney LiveStreams, and I'm joined by my invisible production team, ably led by Philippa Shipley. I want to thank Helen Avery, who is our ESG editor, and her guests for last week's live stream. Those of you who didn't see it, and I recommend it to you highly, you can see that session on demand on euromoney.com/livestream, where this episode will also be available on demand in about an hour. Just to remind you, we encourage you to ask questions to our guests throughout the stream. So you can ask a question at any moment. We will have a dedicated part of the episode in about 30-35 minutes where we will answer those questions. I can't promise we can answer them all, but we will try. You can upvote questions. So next to the questions, you will see a thumbs up button. If you click on that, it upvotes it, it puts it to the top of my question list. Doesn't necessarily mean I'll answer it, but it does mean I see it. So if we're having a lot of questions, upvoting really helps us navigate those. And speaking of navigating, today's show is called Qatar, Navigating the New Normal. And over the next 40 to 50 minutes, we're going to look in detail at how the Gulf state of Qatar is responding to the pandemic, what this crisis means for its future, and much more. And as many of you know, I'm sure, because I've seen some of the people registered, and we know you, we've traveled to and worked with Qatar for many years. And we're really, really genuinely pleased that Commercial Bank of Qatar reached out to us and then decided to support this show. So thank you very much to all of the team there. So to help us understand this new normal, what it is, and indeed how to navigate it, I am pleased to say that we have three very senior figures from two of Qatar's most important publicly listed companies. United Development Company, and of course, Commercial Bank of Qatar. Just a small note of protocol, because I know that we have a number of investors and analysts who are in our audience today. All of our guests remain in the Q2 results quiet period, and therefore we cannot and will not take questions or make comments on anything that might be construed as commercially sensitive in reference to those results. So you can ask, but we're not going to answer it. So let me turn to my guests. I'd like to welcome to the Euromoney live stream, Mr. Ibrahim Al-Othman, President and Chief Executive Officer of United Development Company, Mr. Joseph Abraham, who is Group CEO of Commercial Bank of Qatar, and Mr. Raju, Buddhirajuon, Executive General Manager, Wholesale Banking at Commercial Bank. Ibrahim, I'd like to come to you first. Could you just tell us a little bit about who you are and what you do?
I'm Ibrahim Jassim Al-Othman Fakhro. I am the President and Chief Executive Officer of United Development Company. We're the master developer of the Pearl Qatar. The Pearl Qatar is a man-made island, and it has the community and the host like around 40,000 people on its earth. And it's a place for leisure, living, shopping, and dining.
I visited it. It's a great place. We'll talk about that a lot more in a minute. We're already getting questions from people about it. Joseph, over to you. Introduce yourself. I've said who you are, but maybe you can give us a little bit of color and also tell us a little bit about Commercial Bank, what makes it special.
Good afternoon, Richard, and great to see you. My name is Joseph Ibrahim. I'm the Group CEO of Commercial Bank of Qatar. Commercial Bank has been established in Qatar for 45 years and is the second largest conventional bank in Qatar. We have a significant presence, of course, in Qatar, but we also have 100% subsidiary in Turkey, and we have associate banks in Oman and in the UAE. So, we're very happy to support the corporate sector and retail sectors in Qatar and across the region.
Thank you very much. Raju, what about, I think we know now who Commercial Bank are, if we didn't know before. What is it that you do there specifically?
Yeah. So good afternoon, Richard and everyone. I look after the wholesale banking, which essentially is corporate banking and including government and public sector, and the transaction banking for commercial bank.
And how long have you been in Qatar?
I've been in Qatar for 8 years in 2 stints, 4 years each. This time for 4 years. In between, I was in Dubai for 2 years.
I'm not going to ask you about your preferences, but I'm going to ask you whether you, how you feel Qatar has changed. I mean, it's an incredibly dynamic and ever-changing place. Whenever I visit, something's moved, something's been built, some road has changed. Have you seen a lot of change in your 2 stints here?
Absolutely. I think the change is phenomenal. I mean, many of the people who have been even longer than I have been here, it's really phenomenal. When you walk out on the street, it looks completely different every 3 years. There's a lot of construction going on, and especially with 2022 World Cup coming in, there's a lot of infrastructure being built.
I know we'll come on to talk about that a little later. Ibrahim, if I can come back to you, I want to start by understanding a little bit about how Qatar has managed the pandemic and the lockdown. You know, you are the major developer in the country. What challenges did the lockdown and the pandemic bring to you, and how did you manage them?
No question, the pandemic has severely impacted the business in Qatar, and like the rest of the world. And you can see that very evidently on the real estate sector, the retail sector, the navigation, the aviation, all pillars actually of the economy. But we saw this, the drop actually started a few years back with the start of the decline actually of the oil prices back in early 2015. We noticed that there was a drop actually also along with the drop in oil prices. We saw the drop in the retail and the real estate sector. It was not as significant as you see with the COVID-19. However, it was a manageable thing, and people had time then to cope up with the drop that was happening. But then the political situation in the region also added, impedance to the growth in the retail and real estate sector. And also the oil prices and gas prices also didn't help. Since 2019, you saw much fluctuations and actually a severe drop in the prices. Then COVID-19 came in and made things even worse. So all of that, of course, have impacted the business and all pillars of the economy. You see it stretching out in all sectors quite evidently. However, like I said, we saw that there was a drop coming up, not necessarily because of the COVID-19, but we saw that there was an oversupply probably. There was a shift, starting a trending of the online business, in particular for the retail sector. At the time, we knew also we had the oversupply of commercial buildings, if you like, was also a criteria, and we saw it coming. So since then, we started having in place plans that we need to maintain a healthy balance sheet, a solid one, and also to have quick access to cash and liquidity. Of course, we were doing our own scenarios for what if the business goes down for any particular reason. Definitely, COVID-19 was none of the drills that I have ever attended to.
Yeah, well, not only you, I think, to be fair. I think none of us were looking at it.
Something really unprecedented, something that I, at least myself, I've never imagined myself to be in this situation. However, we were working always on something that will slow down the business, or at least will interrupt the business at any given day. You know, the normal things that you would do drills for, like earthquake, cyber attack, wars, and you name it. So we always had that envisioned in mind, that what if something goes wrong? And that's why I said, no, we always thought in the best thing, and we need to be able to sustain the business for at least a quarter or two until we absorb the initial shock of any significant drop in the business. And thank God, we were probably, I wouldn't say completely ready for what was coming, but at least we were equipped with the ammunitions to enable us to surf through the initial 3 months, which was really devastating to the entire world, not just Qatar or the business.
Absolutely.
Of Qatar. Yeah.
We all were affected. But, you know, as a developer, did you continue the construction, or did you halt? And did sales change? I mean, how did it affect you in terms of your revenue and your expenses, and therefore, I suppose, your eventual profit?
Absolutely. The one thing I want to assure you of, we did not stop our construction business, the development, because, you know, we have tough targets and stretched coming up, especially for the World Cup in 2022. The major capital investment did not stop. And thanks to our partners, also the financial institutions that continued the support with us for our major projects, and that we did not. In fact, we just 2 or 3 weeks ago, we awarded a major contracts for the G1 development, which is the recent development after the Pearl that we have undertaken. And we just awarded contracts worth of $400 million contracts for the infrastructures and the buildings that will be constructed in the G1 island. Yes, we deferred some of non-essential capital investments, if you like, but those are nice to have, if you like, part of our ongoing enhancement on the island. But the major ones, the ones that we are committed to, we didn't stop at all.
Thank you.
In fact, if I can show you a quick glimpse of that, Shahar, if you can show us just the camera. I have you the camera here positioned over the Pearl, and we'll show you just a view of the Pearl. That's the Pearl. Now it's 2:30 or 2:15 in Qatar, and it's you see people probably moving out from the Pearl and into the Pearl. But if we can see also the G1 construction, usually at this hour the activities slow down to nil because of the heat. So the contractors, they take a few hours off until they go back to the afternoon shift, which is like in 2 hours time or so. But that's the G1. The construction did not stop, and it's ongoing.
That's fantastic. That is brilliant. Real time. I love it. Thank you, Ibrahim. That's truly special. There's a couple of points I want to pick up on that, but I want to come to Joseph first. Joseph, I mean, you know, the lockdown, the pandemic hit quickly. That must have been an enormous challenge to the continuity of the bank's business and helping serve clients like Ibrahim. What did you do? How did you manage that transition so quickly?
Thank you, Richard. I would just say that having been to Ibrahim's office, he has one of the best views in Doha. So it's well worth visiting him there. Regarding your question on what and how did we manage? Yes, you're right. It was very sudden and escalated quite rapidly. So Our first priority, of course, was to ensure that the health and safety of our clients and that they could interact and deal with us in a safe manner, and our staff. So, of course, we had the normal protocols around hygiene, sanitation, and then social distancing to make sure that our clients were able to do their banking services. Now, in that regard, I would say, apart from the normal protocols, we had to operate with a much lower footprint of branches and at the same time, we had 80% of our staff working from home. So there were two implications of this. How do you manage the crowds in a safe manner? And I think one of the innovations that we did introduce then, and which has been very effective, is the introduction of our appointment system. This is for banking. So this enabled, one is to manage the crowd and the density, but two, also to ensure that the clients who wanted to come to the branches were able to do and minimize the time that they actually spent there. So that was the first thing, which I think will continue. But it actually was introduced specifically to manage the situation. The second thing, and that's something that we've been working on for the last number of years, is enabling our clients to do more of their banking and most of their transactions either digitally or on a self-service basis. So whether it's check deposit machines, whether it's cash deposit machines, whether it's enabling people to interact all their requirements digitally, so their need to come to the branch has reduced. And this also applies on the corporate banking side, where we've got cash management, etc. So the whole digital platform, the use of it has accelerated. And just an example, we were able to also, many of the exchange houses where some of the people use them to send their money overseas, many of them were closed during the initial phases of the lockdown. And that required people, because their families being supported abroad. So we introduced within 2 weeks, many of the household staff are not able to go to the exchange. So we introduced a commercial bank household staff remittance proposition. So the employer was able to actually online create a debit card for their staff, and they're also able to, on an online basis, enable their remittances to be done for the domestic household workers. So that was very useful in, again, sorting out a very specific issue for people. And I believe that now, once people have adapted that or adopted it, they will actually do that in the future. Similarly, on the staff side, we had a whole issue around working from home, making sure we were enabled, but also ensuring that our staff were split into various teams so that when and if someone was infected, we didn't have a single point concentration risk. So we've split teams across locations and also had backup teams available, say for branches in case someone got infected, so that we could move them out and sanitize and then bring in a new team. So there were a number of factors around that, which we had to adapt to on a quite rapid basis, but I'm glad to say that it all is working well.
Well, I'm glad to hear that. I'm going to ask you a slightly naughty question, because you know that our old, well, actually, our first friend in Qatar, the person that brought us to Qatar, good Lord, nearly 10 years, more than 10 years ago, was the governor of the central bank. And he's a great chap, good friend of mine, extremely nice man. I want to sort of ask you the question as to how did the central bank and the authority, the monetary authorities, act? Because banks are systemically important. Was there a great deal of cooperation between you and the central bank during the initial period and since then?
Absolutely. We had very regular meetings of all the bank CEOs with His Excellency the Governor and the Deputy Governor and his team. And of course then His Highness the Emir and the Central Bank and the Ministry of Finance came out with the stimulus program to support the SME and the corporate sector and also provide liquidity into the banking system. But that was, I think, quite appropriate and pretty rapidly implemented. So that support has been there. And I would say the governor has always been a big supporter of digital and digital banking and enhancing that. So those initiatives and that focus has actually benefited during this COVID crisis.
Yeah,
and
there is, as Ibrahim has said, and you sort of touched on. I mean, Qatar has experienced the 2008 crisis, the 2017 embargo. If there is to be such a thing as a silver lining, there is track record of being very responsive to sudden and unexpected crises.
Yes, I would say Qatar has developed a level of resilience.
That's a good word, yeah.
Yes, and that's definitely stood Qatar well, both in terms of policy and very strong execution. So on both these aspects, Qatar has, as you say, has some experience and has developed resilience.
Well, it's also interesting, policy and execution are two different things, as we've found out in the UK. Not from our central bank, it must be said. Our government has lots of policies. Some of them have been implemented in rather peculiar ways, but this is my opinion, not anyone else's. Raju, I want to come to you because I want to pick up a point that Ibrahim made about, during the lockdown and the pandemic, it was very important for large corporates, and indeed I'm sure small corporates, to work with their banks. How did you work with your clients? What were their needs and how did you meet them?
So, firstly, Qatar government moved very fast, and on March 16th itself came out with several kind of packages for various businesses. Okay, and the kind of fiscal stimulus they announced was in the range of Qatari Riyal 75 billion. Now, this is almost like 10% of the GDP. There are only 3 countries in the world who have done a higher fiscal stimulus than this. There's an outlier, Japan, which has done around 21%. Then you have US, which has done 12%, and Brazil, which has done 11%. But they've done it in different phases. Qatar government stepped in and did a very big stimulus right in the beginning, and that has helped a lot, actually. And in specific terms, out of this 75 billion, 50 billion was given to the financial institutions for liquidity purposes, to make sure that all the banks could offer liquidity to various corporations and they would never suffer from lack of liquidity. Then government funds were supporting the stock market to the tune of 10 billion. And there was support to businesses through Qatar Development Bank, which was actually paying cash to various businesses for rentals as well as salaries. So you could actually apply through banks, and Qatar Development Bank would give you 3 to 6 months worth of salaries and rentals. And that helped a lot. In addition to that, they actually institutionalized the forbearance and they postponed the installments for various sectors for 6 months, thereby releasing the much needed liquidity for the customers. So that was on a macroeconomic piece. At a company level, Commercial Bank offers several innovative technology products like corporate internet banking, we offer mobile banking, and we were going through different companies to implement this to do their business seamlessly without coming to the branch, because technology enables you to do this now. And for example, you have a company where some of the subsidiaries have completely gone online while the others are in the process of reorienting their internal procedures to actually come on. So what has this whole obstruction done is that many of the companies who had their own priorities all of a sudden had to change and to move on to technology platforms to do their businesses seamlessly. And using our multiple applications, basically, they had to pay the vendors, they had to maintain the staff and their salaries, they had to make sure that they deposit their checks, and all this is now available through technology platforms. So many of the companies have really moved on to a very, very fast adoption. And they've realized, actually, many may not have realized earlier, that you can do a lot of business online with the help of technology. I think it's quite amazing.
Yeah, we've realized that.
Yeah.
I haven't left my office since March the 11th, which is, I haven't been on a plane, it's marvelous. But I mean, in the core of everything, a bank is a lender. And when you have a crisis like this, there's a cash flow issue for some of your clients. What did you do to help them get over this, bridge this period where, you know, revenues could have fallen off a cliff in unprecedented ways, but costs were still there maybe in a limited form, but they were still there. You know, how did you sit down with your larger clients, your corporate clients, and say, okay, this is what we can do for you?
See, you know, during times of crisis, cash is king, and most of the companies would like to have cash. So as a prudent measure, most of the companies do keep a certain amount of cash on their balance sheet for a rainy day. And thanks to some of the crises that have happened before, they do keep a fair amount of cash even for a stress day scenario. So they do stress testing and they keep some cash. What we have done is we have worked very closely with each customer. And since the government had already implemented the forbearance, which is postponement of all repayments of the loans for 6 months period, we have tried to make sure that the companies could actually keep cash, either the one that they had as reserves or the one that they were supposed to make a repayment. We have actually rescheduled them, restructured them in such a manner that they can sit on cash and they can meet all their obligations and be ready and be fighting fit on the day when the economy opens and they get down to business. They'll need that cash again. So we have been working with customers for customized solutions, actually, because for different sectors, it's different.
It was almost like this has been scripted, because my next question, which I'm going to go back to Ibrahim for, is, you know, I don't think we're over the pandemic, but we're certainly, as Churchill said, I think we're past the end, you know, we're at the end of the beginning, and things are beginning to reopen. Certainly in the UK. How are things in Qatar? I mean, where are you in terms of reigniting the economic activity, and what does this mean for UDC?
Well, you'll be surprised. I mean, people were really anxious to see this thing over with, and at least to be able to go back, not necessarily just dining in into the restaurant, but at least be able to have some breather outside.
Yes.
Here at the Pearl, and also other areas in Qatar, you see people really enjoying their time. Yes, with different behaviors that you see, keeping the social distancing, putting the masks on, being more aware of, you know, the social distancing. But I really see it coming back together, and especially, you know, that traveling is not so encouraged at this moment. You see the life is coming back at a very rapid pace at the moment. And like Raju just mentioned, what helped also the online business. So people were just ordering online all the time through the platforms. That also helped a lot. Come to the weekend here in the Pearl or in Qatar, you see the beaches are all full of people. Now, whether to say that this is the right thing to do at the moment or not, but it's a reality. You see it, and you see that people are really enjoying themselves. And it's about time that we just get over this fear, in my opinion, and start to live our lives normal like it was. Maybe it will not be exactly the same. Maybe it will not be over completely very soon. But I think we need to gradually go back to norm and practice our lives as it used to be.
So are you saying that we're going to see less of our Qatari friends in London this summer, that they'll be staycationing on the Pearl?
Yes, it's unfortunate actually, but it's a reality now. Wow. But I'm not sure that you can keep Qataris away from London for too long. So that will be a tough challenge.
We need them. Please send them back. We need them to get our economy going again. I mean, so what I'm hearing from you is that you're seeing not so much a V shape in terms of it, but a you know, a gradual increase in economic activity in Qatar for the remainder of the year. You know, everyone says second wave and all that. I'm not a believer in. I think we have to learn to live with it. Is that what you see? Is that, you know, it may take us some time, but the trend path is quite clearly, you know, back upwards.
Absolutely, and it has to start. And you cannot really just lock yourself down forever. Things have to move and started to move, and I'm sure by, let's say, late this year or early next year, that we will see quite a change. Keeping in mind that things will not be exactly the way we used to behave, probably to the benefits of our health. However, we need to be also aware that we need to go back on track and continue with our lives.
Yes, we can't stay locked down forever. That would be, well, wrong and unhealthy. Joseph, I'd like really to direct the same question to you, and picking up on points that both you and Raju made about, you know, the government stepped in and provided forbearance and provided a bridge, which seems to be something that a lot of governments have done. I mean, Qatar obviously done it to some extent more than others. But at some point, that bridge has got to come to an end, and it's got to reach the other side. Are you seeing that now in the numbers that you're looking at, in terms of a pickup of activity across all the different parts of your business, and that things are beginning to start to get back, not to normal, but certainly better than they were maybe a month or 6 weeks ago?
Yes, I would say that. I mean, if I look at certain indicators around, say, credit card spend, which if you compare from our figures that I've seen, our year-on-year domestic spend was down about 30%, whereas international was down about 65%, which shows the lack of travel, but it just also shows that people were still spending money on online internationally.
Yeah.
Obviously, one was traveling. But we're already seeing in July, if you think that, I would say that April and May were the low points of spend, we're already seeing an uptick coming through in June and July in the significant double digits across our card spend. And we expect that trend to continue. So to me, that's the best indicator of as what Ibrahim said about people coming out and starting to spend now. And this is also aligned with the opening up of the post-COVID restrictions. So we've opened up malls, we opened up restaurants. So that's going to work too. And I think we'll move to the next phase in August where also travel will be opened up. I mean, this is the anticipation. So I would expect the trends to move up in that spend on the actual retail and domestic spend. And similarly for companies, as Raju said, there's been a lot of forbearance on their loan and other installments. And I believe that that will continue because there are a number of, if you look at it, the government spend is also a very important part of economic activity in Qatar. And that the Qatar government and the Qatar economy has significant cushions. Qatar has one of the strongest international level of reserves in terms of, and the QCB also has significant reserves. And the ability, also Qatar has one of the lowest fiscal break-even points at about $43. It's the lowest in the GCC. And also, whilst oil prices have gone down, it's absolutely correct. The LNG price is a great proportion of it is indexed on a long-term contract. So that downturn in LNG prices will come through is delayed by about 6 to 8 months, that reduction in government revenue. So the government has the firepower, it will continue. And as we said, we're on track for 2022. So the government expenditure will continue and be a support to the economy. As the economy opens up, I think the private sector will also be opening up. But there are also new measures coming through, I would say, around self-sufficiency, etc., where the COVID is going to drive, I believe, on logistics, on self-sufficiency, on technology. So all these are also areas of investment. As an example, we saw something where we're looking at the manufacturing of material for face masks. Now that will, so that's obviously, I think most governments in the world are going to be looking at health and health-related industries and making sure they have some levels of self-sufficiency, given sometimes how the global supply chains work. So all these will also be new spurs and new impetus to activity. And I would say in terms of the overall effects, now for the banking sector, we often talk about what's the effect on the provisioning or the bad debts, right?
Well,
right.
Yes.
That's the big elephant in the room always. I would say that because of the stimulus measures and the support given to many companies, and this is in Qatar, but across the world, we're in a sort of space where people are still finding the way. So if you look at the results of, say, the American JP Morgan, they had about $10.5 billion of provisions for this quarter. Their normal run rate last year was about $2 billion. But within that $10.5 billion, almost about $8.5 billion was reserves, not actual bad debts, but they were just building in anticipation. I think people and banks are being cautious because they haven't yet seen the effects of that come through. And whether it'll come through in the full manner or not, we still don't know, because we're all in uncharted territory in that sense.
JP Morgan's actions were described by, I can't remember who it was on Bloomberg, I think it might have been Matt Levine this morning, as the kitchen sink provisioning strategy. Or I think actually they were referring to Wells Fargo, but the idea is that you think of anything that could possibly go wrong, provision for it. And therefore your results in next year should be correspondingly better. I wanted to, we've got an enormous number of questions. We've all got over 30 questions, and they're complex and nuanced questions. I'd like to ask our audience if they can help me by upvoting some of the questions. So if you go, audience, you go to the Q&A, you click on upvote. That'll help me go through them because, as I say, there are a lot and many of them are multi-part. I think I'm going to come to some questions now. There are a few more I have, but we've only got about 20 minutes left, and we want to try and cover these. And I'm also to our questioners. I'm going to try and sort of, some people have asked questions that are relatively similar, so I might summarize them and ask that as a particular question. So I'm going to ask Ibrahim first. Generally, people are interested in the outlook for the real estate sector, and particularly for things like retail and commercial. And I think by outlook, we mean, okay, things are going to be difficult for the next 6 months, we know that. But has the demand picture for real estate in Qatar fundamentally changed as a result of COVID, or are we just seeing an acceleration in trends that were already there?
You see, in some, you see that change. Yes, the transactions of sales executed of units is not as active as it used to be, basically because people were not going out to buy. However, I won't be telling a secret, during the past 2 weeks, I've been flooded with queries, and in fact, SPAs, sales and purchase agreements, been signed just for people who realized how beautiful really to stay at the Pearl Qatar during such time. And that helped in a way. Big transactions like sales of plots, we have probably a challenge with that because people are still, wondering around whether to embark on a new investments and all. Given probably the loss of jobs here or there. But it is going to be difficult. We have to weather through it. We have our plans in place. I'm not too worried, but we just have to put our act together and, put the plans to executions.
Okay. Joseph, a question for you from my friend David Babushia, who is from Reuters. So this is a journalist asking you a question. Qatari banks have traditionally relied on external funding. Are there concerns that lower for longer oil prices and the coronavirus crisis might lead to a withdrawal of non-domestic deposits from Qatari banks? And do you expect the QIA to inject liquidity as they did after 2017? You can choose which part, either or both of those that you answer.
Sure. I would say that actually we found the international investors very supportive and actually keen on Qatar, because I mentioned earlier about resilience. So they already saw after 2017 the resilience of Qatar and the Qatari banking sector, and how it has still access to the international market. So we're actually seeing a significant interest or from overseas investors, and this is both, let's say, at deposit levels, but also if you just look at Qatar reopened the international bond markets with their $10 billion issuance, which was the first GCC country to issue after during the COVID. And the 10 billion bond was oversubscribed up to 45 billion of demand. And it was at the lowest pricing that had ever been issued for such a bond. And similarly, QNB has also gone into the markets. And so we're finding very good appetite for Qatari paper. And remember, Qatar remains a AA rated country with a stable outlook, and the entire banking and all the banks also have very good ratings with stable outlooks generally. So I would say that, frankly, this, during this time, the interest and the support from the international investor community for Qatari banks has actually been very positive, and it continues to be so. I would say in 2017 there was slightly more, let's say, stress, but that experience has actually reassured and encouraged the foreign investors about the strength of the Qatari banking system and the Qatari economy.
Thank you. I think I'm looking through the questions, nearly 40 questions here, trying to group them into topics. I think one topic that we should all talk about, and I wanted to talk about anyway, is 2022, is the World Cup. Now, Ibrahim, and I think you, Joseph, as well, have also said that we've got that coming up. It's still very much going ahead. Do you feel that there is any chance that this could deter people making investments, private sector, government, in 2022? Might it be a different 2022? Ibrahim, I think we'll start with you. Is there going to be any impact on that, or are we going to see a similar picture in terms of demand for real estate?
I'll speak about UDC and the projects that we have undertaken.
Please, yes.
Like I said earlier, we just embarked on the G1 development, and we are targeting to finish the majority.
Oh, I think we've lost Ibrahim. He went there. We'll come back to Ibrahim on that one.
During 2022. So that is an ongoing thing, and it's not that we think in 2022 will be the last of the major events that will happen in Qatar. We're hoping and we're looking forward to see more main events being achieved and planned to take place in Qatar. So we have a major development really coming up with the G1 development. There will be state-of-the-art or 5-star, if not 7-star hotel that will be in the G1 island with a golf course, the air-conditioned promenade with beautiful parks and all. So if you tell me that are we going to relax on the development, my question to you here at UDC, no, actually we're going at full speed. And if there is more in the pipeline, we're more happy to take more of these.
You're not worried about oversupply? I mean, the perennial question about...
Good question. I'm always asked about this.
There we go. Sorry, I've asked you again.
No, I like this question. Actually, the growth will always be there. People will still be getting married and getting more children. People will have, you'll have a new fresh graduate students wanting to have their own houses and all. At the moment, and as you're very familiar with, the Pearl is like a niche product. The G1 will be something similar as well. However, we're thinking now later on at the next phase of the development, we probably target a different type of development in different areas of Qatar. So I see the growth that will always be there. We talked about the retail and the commercial sector. Yes, that might be a challenge to satisfy, but in my opinion, the demand for housing will always be there. Now, be it it's different levels and categories of housing that are needed for the population here in Qatar.
And commercial, I mean, has the market reached an equilibrium in commercial real estate? A lot of lovely buildings.
Commercial has been a challenge, frankly speaking. It's not as easy, yes. And there is good supply in the market of the commercial. But eventually it will level out. In the 80s, and we were young at the time, we saw that happening, if you recall, in the States, and especially in the states that depended on the oil sector, like Texas at the time. So high rises of empty offices at the time. But then what happened then? 5 years later, it went again into being fully occupied. I envision that the same thing will happen here in Qatar. The demand will continue later on, not necessarily now, not necessarily this year, but it's coming up. So I'm not totally worried about that. And like Joseph and Raju mentioned, alhamdulillah, Qatar holds an excellent rating, and there is a great wealth in this country that we will inshallah capitalize on, and the country will always flourish.
Well, we had our own experience. I'm sure you remember it, Ibrahim, Canary Wharf, which went bankrupt, I think, 3 times before a consortium involving the QIA ended up buying it. Let's see how it carries on in the new normal. The second general group of questions is about innovation and technology. And I think I'll address this to Raju and to Joseph particularly, but Ibrahim, I'd like you to come in at the end. One trend that I think, one fact I think that we can say with some degree of certainty, that the pandemic has accelerated the adoption of digital technology. Now, what does that, I mean, we talked a little bit about this in the context of the bank, but has it changed your attitude as senior executives as to what you now need to do in order to fully digitize the bank and build digital banking platforms, as opposed to just taking what you normally did and turning it into something you did online? Joseph, I think, if you want to talk about your innovation and digitization.
Richard, I believe as you said, there's a fundamental change in customer behavior. And it's around, since they were forced to use digital or non-face-to-face channels, people have found that it's not so difficult, or it's actually quite convenient, or it's actually quite pleasant. And so that will change customer behavior. And ultimately, we are driven by customer behavior. And for us, therefore, we have to, it actually is a window of opportunity to actually accelerate the digital agenda or digital adoption. And most banks, and almost any bank or any company, will talk about their digital strategy. So I'm not going to say anything particular about that aspect, but I do believe that all of us will have to adopt, and this is across all industries, the whole digital interaction and how we interact with clients will get transformed in that space. And but it's also to make sure that it's a straight through process. It's not just the front end, but it's right through your organization that you embed automation, whether it's robotic process automation, it's AI, etc., to make sure that ultimately the customers get the benefit of it, because your competitors are going to be adopting this. And I think that is the challenge. Whether banks take a pure digital only approach, or, you know, I've seen a number of banks have actually launched digital only banks, you know, subsidiaries, etc. And they've had I'd say, checkered history. And I think some we've seen have done well, some haven't done so well. I believe more important for the consumer is actually the ease of use. And I think they're a little different to whether it's a digital only bank. Some of them have concerns about their long-term creditworthiness or otherwise practice. So there's that benefit of being seen as solid and stable, which in banking is very important if you're going to be putting your money there.
It's not your money.
Yes, exactly. So, but if you're going to be putting your money, I would like to put it in something which is quite well established. So I think it's much more the customer interaction, the customer, how do you say, ease of use, which is important, rather than as a digital only platform, where it's a bank's digital offerings.
You're the second largest bank in conventional bank in Qatar. But I mean, on a global scale, and with the greatest of respect, you're not an enormous bank. How do you compete with either the data or the investment firepower that a JP Morgan or an Ant Financial or someone like that can bring? I mean, that must, to develop competitive products when you have, your relatively small data pools, relatively small customer bases. How do you manage that challenge?
I spent most of my career in large multinationals who had global presences and global technology teams. I would actually say that in today's world, the nimbleness and the speed of execution of banks like Commercial Bank or a large or a local bank or a regional bank actually far outpaces the international behemoths, because they are disadvantaged on two aspects. One is their whole cost of execution is so high. And then it's the speed of execution, because they have to do it as per huge international protocols across 50 countries or 20 countries or even, but just the sheer scale and size makes them less than nimble. So the speed with which our technology teams can work, and technology now is accessible. So it's really about the speed and the price point at which you can execute. I found, frankly, working with Commercial Bank really energizing, because that is, compared to my past experience with very large and reputed multinational.
We're not going to mention any names, but yeah, I get the point.
But that's actually a huge advantage for a local bank. So as an example, we have a 60-second remittance offering, which we started and we've developed. And so today, over the last 3 years, we have become the largest provider of international remittance in Qatar. We do almost 500,000 a month. As a context, 3.5, 4 years ago, we were doing 5,000 a month. And that's because we deploy technology, etc. And in fact, just as an anecdote, one of my colleagues from one of my institutions that I work for rang me once and said, one of our team was asking, there's this bank in the Middle East called Commercial Bank who's able to send a remittance from Qatar to India in less than 60 seconds. How come we can't do that yet? So they're productivity. So that's really the advantage, actually, of a much more nimble and agile player that you can do.
That's very good. That was, that's a very interesting perspective. Raju, do you want to? I mean, do you want to say a few words? We're going to have to close soon. I have one more big question to ask all three of you, but maybe you want to comment both on that and on 2022, anything else we've been talking about.
Sometimes when you're analyzing things in the middle of a storm, you tend to miss the big picture. So if you see some of the things that are happening in Qatar, for example, so there is a North Field expansion of Qatar, where gas production is going to go up by 65% in the next 4-5 years. And the contracts are about to be given in the 4th quarter of this year. And most of the design work is complete. If you see Qatar Airport, it handled approximately 39 million customers in 2019. And it's on a major expansion to handle 53 million first and 60 million. So just for example, if it handles a 50 million kind of a customer number, if approximately 0.5% of those people choose to stay back because a country is offering a 48-hour or a 72-hour visa, that would mean approximately 2% of 50 million is approximately 1 million. So that would take care of all the excess capacity in the hotels and so on and so forth. So it's a normal feature that the supply always runs ahead of demand. And so therefore, if you look at all the data points, you'll see that if you imagine Qatar 5 years from now, you're actually going to see a very prosperous Qatar, irrespective of what happens to Corona and irrespective of what happens to the gas price and so on. So we should not take our eye off the ball from the big picture. There is definitely a destruction of demand because of Corona, but that is not going to be, it's a minor roadblock in the grand scheme of things. And therefore, I feel very positive, and many of the businesses are still trying to invest in the country and grow.
That's brilliant. Thank you very much for that. So one final question, and this is from our audience. We seem to have lost Joseph for a minute, so I have to go to Ibrahim for, oh, he's back again. I like this question, but I'm going to change it slightly. And the question is, how do we make the new normal a better one than the old normal? You can think about that for a second, and then Ibrahim, what do we do to build back better?
Well, I tell you, we have a saying that the hit that doesn't kill you makes you stronger. And I think we went through a huge hurdle in this. And something positive for the young generation, for our kids, for the youth. I think they've seen a major event happening over the past few months. I believe they have learned a lot from it, and that this is going to make them very strong to face challenges and real life coming up later. I think they have done extremely well in all sectors, be it the government sector, healthcare, workplaces, the people themselves, our kids. I'm sure everybody learned a lot from this atrocity, if you like, and I only look forward for positive things, inshallah, coming up resulting from this pandemic.
Thank you. Joseph, how do we build back better?
Yeah, I would say the importance and the role of technology is going to be much more prevalent in people's thinking. I think people have realized that this is going to be very, very important. So I think that is going to be incorporated in all levels, policy and at the individual company level. And that, again, as I said, Qatar has a very high level of, I think, for penetration of technology and also awareness. So the advantage, and that I'm absolutely convinced is going to be a key part of the planning going forward. Plus, as Ibrahim said, the resilience that has been built up over the last few years, the diversification of supply chains, the, we talk about, say, commercial real estate. Yes, there's some short-term oversupply in that, but the banks are not financing anymore. So that indigestion will get absorbed over time. And I don't think that will happen again because people have learned from these various aspects. So overall, I would say that the adoption of technology, the adoption of diversification of supply chains, logistics, and new industries for self-sufficiency will actually help to actually create a more diversified economy. And the 2022 World Cup, etc. All these are additions which will only encourage and increase that diversification of international awareness and international investment into Qatar.
Thank you. Very, very, again, very good points. Raju, we've got a couple of minutes, but I need most of them for my exit. So if you could be quick, give us your thoughts on how we build back better.
So I would just build on what Ibrahim and Joseph said. During a 2008 crisis, businesses realized that they need to be liquid and deleveraged and de-risked. Then the blockade happened in Qatar and they realized the importance of diversification of supply chains. I think during Corona, most of the businesses have realized that investments in technology and digitization will produce disproportionate returns in the future. So those businesses which actually digitize fast and go into technology will actually come out big winners in the end.
Well, those are three, I think, incredibly wise and insightful views. I always feel that it's me that gets the benefit of these sessions because I get to talk to three extremely experienced, intelligent, and entertaining people. But we need to bring it to a close. I want to apologize to the 36 people that asked questions that we haven't answered. I think we've covered some of the topics that you're covering, you asked about, but not all. We will, of course, look at all the questions. If we can reply to some of them, they're quite specific. I'm sure we will. But it's been an amazing session. We had well over 500 people watching, taking part, still are, nearly that amount, which is a record by some way for our webcasts. So thank you very much to all of you for coming. Next week, whilst not anywhere near as interesting as this one, we do have something quite special for you. We have the Chief Executive of UniCredit, Jean-Pierre Mustier, who is not only the Chief Executive of UniCredit, but also the President of the European Banking Federation, a very important European banker, and he will be speaking exclusively to our Europe editor, Dominic O'Neill, on European banking after the pandemic. And Dominic and Jean-Pierre will be live at 2 p.m. British Summer Time on Wednesday, the 22nd of July. So once again, thank you to Ibrahim, to Joseph, and to Raju for giving up their time today, for being on the show. I found it to be fascinating, and with Ibrahim's real-time view of the Pearl and Giwan, we've broke new ground in digital products. So that's another first, and we need to do that again. It was great. You can get more information, of course, from them, from the websites of Commercial Bank and UDC, or if you want to know anything else, get in touch with us. I want to thank Philippa and the production team, Victoria, Claudia, Xanthi, all of the people at Euromoney who are still working from home to make this happen every week. It's an incredible effort, and they do an enormous amount of work behind the scenes. Also to the team at Commercial Bank of Qatar, Abir and Hassan, who also do an extremely large amount of work behind the scenes. Without them, we wouldn't be here. So that about wraps it up for this week's. Do send us your comments, questions, funny clips, or whatever, to amuse us to streams@euromoney.com. Visit our website, euromoney.com/livestream, or follow us on social media in all the places you'd expect to find us. A final big Euromoney thank you to you, our audience. We would be here without you, but it's very much nicer knowing that you're here. Stay well, stay sane, stay safe, have some fun, and go shopping. Good afternoon.